Sometimes people underestimate age in women. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, oh, you're so young. It's like, no, I'm just aging well.
Yeah.
Really great
sorry
skincare
that
routine.
you're not.
When my career became much more exciting, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I have to tell people how old I am so that they respect me.
I think there's opportunity to like mentor and coach and support instead of being like, oh gosh, like, can't believe she said that.
I think we have to remind ourselves that we're human, but I think women are just superhuman.
Yeah.
I think I am just... Can women have it all? It's a question we've all pondered. I certainly have. I have the immense pleasure to sit down with my dearest friends, Christy Holtby, Sandra Stabel, and Lana Solberg, who are all badass bosses, who balance leadership roles, their home lives as parents, daughters, spouses, caregivers, and their relentless devotion to their communities. They balance these complex nuances with grace, a smile, and genuine kindness. In a world critical of women, we explore the realities, necessary changes, and ways to crush these ridiculous stereotypes. So ladies, thank you for joining me. You are all my dearest friends, and I'm very privileged to be sitting around this table talking about an important topic. Can women have it all? So we're going to delve into some very complex nuances on whether or not women can have it all. So why don't we start by defining what does can women have it all mean? Christy, let's start with you first.
Oh my God, that depends on the day, the moment, the hour. Like the moment you think you've got it all, then you're like, ooh, just slipped out of grasp. So having it all, I think, has to be contextual. I think I've got it pretty good. I don't know what all means. There's always more.
I agree. What does all mean, Lana?
Yeah, I think the societal expectations of having it all versus what I perceive as having it all, or Christy or Sandra or yourself, I think that's the struggle for me when I open my Instagram or see certain things and I was like, just when I thought I was doing well, there's all these other things going on, right? And I think it's really about the expectations of other people. Some days when I sit in my own world, in my own life, I'm like, I got it good. I got a good job. I got lovely children, a lovely husband, and I'm good to go. And then some days, not so much.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Sandra?
I don't think I give a crap what other people think. I think for me, number one, having it all is being a good mom, being a good wife, being able to have a career where I actually make an impact, and then still have time and energy for like friends and exercising and eating healthy and but then at a certain point there's like a threshold and there's always trade-offs, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can't be good at all the things all the time.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I always struggle with this, and I think we were chatting about this just before we started, on our own pressures that we put on ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think in addition to some of the societal pressures, it's also a product of how we were raised and cultures. And I know for me, it was very much a traditional household, right? My mom stayed home with us, raised us until we were old enough. Then she kind of went to work based on our own personal challenging circumstances. And so seeing that growing up, I was like, this is not happening. I am not doing a traditional role. I'm pursuing a career. I'm pursuing school. But even then, I just always felt like it wasn't enough. You came home with like a B+. It was like, where was your A? And even in a professional setting, sometimes I just feel as though no matter what we do, it's not enough. And sometimes our male counterparts will sit and say the exact same thing and rephrase it. And then they get chest pumps and high fives and a big party. And then, I look at that and say like, what? Did that just happen? So.
And I think the big part of that is caring what other people think. Like that's where I tend to struggle. And it's like the reminder of like, it's not my business what other people think, but I think that's what I struggle with. And I think women sometimes in general have that imposter syndrome, like we're doing super well, but then we have all these other things like, oh my gosh, I fed my kids Kraft dinner today and not a salad, or I didn't make, right? I didn't make homemade bone broth and I didn't go for exercise today and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And it's like, Whereas if you just sit back and just enjoy where you're at or being successful in the season you're in, I think that's the hardest part.
It is hard. Like, who are the 5 people that I need to know, love, and respect me at the end of the day? Right? And that should be enough. Is that having it all to think
Right.
about those people that are closest, and are they good? Am I good? Because to your point, it's just excessive on the more.
Yes. And I think it's hard, probably similar, all of our personalities. We want to do well and we like to have fun and we like to be successful. And it's just like, what does that look like? And I'm so grateful that we found each other because that makes life easier. Because unfortunately, there is some other women in our lives that aren't always as supportive or make it more difficult. So I think gathering your group of those 5 people or 10 people that are close and are supportive makes a huge difference for our mental health as well.
But a lot of those things are conflicting, right? Like I could have like a really great day at work and have like succeeded, but I'm like sort of like on a rush of like, yeah, like did really well. But then because of that, I like don't get home till 6 and I miss supper and I have to pick McDonald's on the way home, or I miss bedtime, or and so then like one success leads to like another failure because you're just like always kind of like balancing off the trade-offs.
Or it's the guilt I find too. Like I worked last night till 6 and then tonight I wasn't going to be home till late. So then I felt this need that I had to like make something for supper. So, and not even so much for my husband because he's very capable. I travel for work. He does all the things, but it was more like the kids are going to get home and I have to rush to baseball in half an hour. Like they're not going to eat a good food, right? And it's like, why do I feel that versus maybe the men don't feel that so much. He's like, I would have just fed them whatever. They would have survived.
But there's also like a moment in time. Like I think that we're kind of a generation where our roles are evolving to that point of like the traditional role of a woman in certain settings. And none of us, I think, conform to what that is. Right? Like ambitious, wanting to have it all. And that's not a bad thing. Like maybe we can't have it all, but it should be okay to want it all. Like when you talk about when men high five and do that stuff, like why can't we at least want it all or strive for it all with the understanding that it's not always going to be within reach?
You touched on something about women not always being supportive. Do you want to dig into that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But I mean, it goes back to the like having a family and then sometimes having a career. I've gotten lots of comments when I put my children in daycare, like, I can't believe you're letting someone else raise your children. And I just wish that we would support women with where they're at and what they have. Like, all of us aren't as privileged as others to have the things we have. And some of us can work, some of us aren't able to, unfortunately. But support women in their decisions. I think that's one of the struggles. And I want to show my daughter, who's 15, that she can work and be successful and still have a great family and raise children and be successful. Whatever that looks like. Maybe her career is different than what mine is and her success is different than what I value. But I think it's more just supporting each other, or like you, for empowered women, empower women, right? And I think sometimes we don't always have that.
I think there's like a generation, maybe a generation above us and 2 generations above us that really struggled,
Right.
and kind of those that made it or were able to like kind of move into leadership positions, they did it at a cost,
Right.
And I think they feel like we need to like endure the same pain,
Right.
and sometimes I feel like as I'm going about, I'm just kind of getting kicked in the shins sometimes by these lovely ladies who are amazing and have done really great things. But instead of supporting the next generation and mentoring and helping out, they
Smoothing
try
the path,
to ensure that we go through the same pain to earn our place.
It shows up in weird ways. Like there was once where, oh my God, like dress code was like the strap on your dress had to be like you had to wear pantyhose. Oh my gosh, like ridiculous ways, to your point of I had to live by these rules and you
Right.
shall too, versus it's really weird that none of us is wearing pink today. That actually seems strange to me, that like not showing up in that way with bright color and wanting to stand out in a room. I also think it's interesting how we all met, being women in rooms, like we were all in the same rooms that was largely dominated by men, and you find each other and then you get things done together.
But it's not often, to your point, I think, that you find super supportive, empowering, like partners and friends. I think it's difficult when you have a female leader who isn't supportive and who does bring you down and make you feel like you're not doing enough because there are only certain amount of spots in the C-suite, or potentially there's like a jealousy or an envy or like this tension that exists where I just don't understand.
You're a threat because you think differently or you
Right.
come from a different background or don't have a PhD or
Right. Yeah. And so I don't know what needs to change. And I'm hoping, and I'm seeing it for sure, it's changing. And I think you're starting to see some societal and even some workplace.
We need women like us that are giving each other high five and chest pumping.
Yeah.
Like the bros.
Yeah, exactly. But what does need to change?
I don't. That's a tough question.
I think it helps a lot. Like there's a lot of like nuance that can start to change over time. Like I very deliberately, like if I'm in a room with mostly men and there's another woman, and this happened recently, I'll amplify what she says. Like if she says something, I'll be like, oh, like I'd like to second what so-and-so said. And like little things like that, I think go a really long way. And then there's times where like I try to make sure if there is like a piece of feedback to give to someone to like help them kind of show up, like I think there's opportunity to like mentor and coach and support. And the more of us that think that way, instead of being like, oh gosh, like I can't believe she said that. Ooh.
And giving that feedback.
Like give the feedback and have that conversation.
I remember, Sandra, I was speaking at this panel once and I was answering a question and said, well, I'm no expert in this field. And then we finished the panel. I came down and I was talking to Sandra. She's like, don't say that. You are the expert.
Yeah.
Right?
You're on the panel.
Why would you downplay that, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think it's, I don't know why we do that, but we tend to do that sometimes. And I think same thing. I'm on a lot of team with a lot of men and there will just be one or two of us in the room, but it's like always supporting and don't get me wrong, men, gender roles, responsibilities around the house, a lot of that has changed. Like I said, I have a very supportive husband who does more laundry than I ever will do. But I think it's just more around the expectation of the caregiver, or like when I go to meetings, people are like, who's looking after the kids? What are they doing? How's your husband handling it? It's like, he's good to go.
Yeah.
And when he goes out of town, no one asks me that, right? So I think it's more just around those expectations and changing that. And I mean, I think it's still important as a mom to be the caregiver and the nurturer, because obviously men and women are very different, right? I still want to be that, and I want to have the cuddles and lay down in bed and put them to bed and all those things too. But yeah, I think it just goes back to what having it all means. And
that hedging is really interesting because like we tell each other like, oh, you don't need to hedge. You don't need to say I'm no expert. But I've been given coaching by men that I come across too strong and that I need to hedge. Like I need to be like, well, this is just an idea. I'm just spitballing here. But has anyone considered, like I've been told to do that more. And so
Let's soften your entrance into conversation.
And so it's like this like double, like from one side, it's like, be confident, own your space, say what you think. And then on the other side, it's like, do it gently and make sure you hedge it so you don't insult anybody.
But we would never say that to men. It's like trying to teach my daughter to be assertive, and people think that that's aggressive. And it's like, no, saying what we want, what we need. And I think it's just showing up more authentically. And I think that's why I also love this group, because we're honest and we share how we feel and what we're doing or what we're struggling with. And I think that's where I see the value in changing things too. Like we don't have to be perfect. And I think the whole social media, Instagram versus reality is like causes half of the struggles and the pressure, and it makes it just difficult for everyone.
I think one of the most kind of powerful tools we actually have is when we're underestimated, to your point. So like when you can enter in a strong position when everyone's expecting you, or maybe you do the soft entrance, and then you can control the room with your like knowledge, your intuition, those moments. It's really interesting when someone has underestimated you, how the power dynamic flips. All of a sudden, it really puts senior leaders, both men and women, on their back foot when you deliver. I also think that sometimes people underestimate age in women. Like, it's like, oh, you're so young. It's like, no, I'm just aging well.
Yeah.
Really great
Sorry
skincare
that you're
routine.
not.
I get that all
Your
the time.
genes,
I
No, me
am
too.
young-ish, but I think I talk young too, and I have like kind of a young energy, which I hope I always have.
Right?
But I get like there's part of me that wants to let my hair go gray because just so that I like look a bit
The
older.
respect.
Right? So
But
weird.
then it's there's like no perfect. You're like
Yeah.
you're just this young woman who knows nothing, and then all of a sudden you're an old hag and
Exactly.
you're done, right? There's no like perfect moment.
It's mystery age.
So let's talk a little bit about that underestimating, because I think that's a powerful skill, in my personal opinion, because I've been in rooms where I am young. I mean, I just dyed my hair a few years ago. It's awesome. But because we're like preparing for this, right? And then I'm like, my grays are just out of control and I only gray on the front of my face. And then I started to get a little insecure because I wanted to look good and feel good. And when I feel good and look good, I just expose this awesome energy. But when I feel down and defeated, then I, curl inside myself. So like I want to talk a little bit about underestimating, because I think it's something as women that we can use as a superpower. So how do we leverage that? Because it's not often we get a seat at the table. And when we do, we really want to make sure it counts.
Agreed. I think like we show up prepared. I think that's part of it, is putting the work in to get the seat at the table. And you talked about the imposter syndrome. And I think part of that is it's just your own self-doubt and want to be at the table. So you're going to show up prepared. You're going to waiting for someone to underestimate you and then deliver in the quietest, like most discreet, subtle way. It's incredible. Like, it feels good. But I think you show up, you look good, you feel good. You come with conviction and own your space. I mean, I work in the philanthropic sector. It's largely women, but you go to a corporate table and they're like, oh, that's the cute charity girl. Like, oh, sweet.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Lovely.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. But it's an interesting dynamic. And then if you know the topic and you have done your due diligence, and we all are ambitious and we all work hard and we all want to have an impact, I think it's just an interesting dynamic where we can shift power.
Consistency is key too.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think sometimes, you can have a success and it'll be like, oh, lucky break. But when you show up like again and again and again and again, and you've done this, Christy, like, with like these major partnerships again and again and again, it's always Christy's name on it. Like, that's Christy. Like, that's not.
Thank you.
That's
Hold on,
not
can we
like.
mic drop?
Yeah. That she didn't like get a lucky break.
Right.
Like, she's really
Numerous
good.
times.
Aw, shucks. Thanks, Sandra.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about body image, because we were talking a little bit about that when we first started, and I was saying how I'm actually really struggling with this right now. I'm just like not feeling great myself. I was doing a whole bunch of training. Actually, Sandra and I were training for a try, like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and then I had lost a whole bunch of weight and then gained it back. And I'm just struggling with that, because you go on Instagram, you open a magazine, and it's literally unrealistic expectation, right? And having it all is looking beautiful and picturesque and just hair flowing in the wind. And so,
But that's society's interpretation of having it all.
Right.
We were just chatting with someone outside the room who says, if women can't have it all, or no, if we were to have it all, why are we always on a diet?
it's true.
Exactly, right? So, but it's so hard because that's what you see. And then you get in your head like, I can't eat this. I got to work out here. I got to do this. And you want to also show your daughters that you
don't
want
talk
to be
about weight.
Yeah, we don't talk about weight at all.
I don't talk
Just
about
talk
weight
about
at home. I don't.
moving your body.
I try to surround myself with women who don't talk about their weight.
Yeah.
Because I just like. Do you think men would ever sit around this table and be like, like my husband talks about his love handles, and like, just like so worried about my weight. Like,
But it's because they don't have that expectation.
it's not the
whereas,
same.
like,
They
it's
do a
not the
little
same.
bit,
Yeah,
but they don't talk about it. in the same
Starting.
way.
Yeah.
They're starting to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some individual men for sure worry about it and have the struggles as well.
But well, with you, Badea, is it more like you don't feel your best? It's less about
That's
like
it.
the
Yeah,
weight or something.
yeah.
It's just like I know that I'm not at my best. I'm
Right.
not in peak performance mode
Right.
across the board, right?
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that that's a healthy healthier perspective on saying, like, you know what, I haven't taken the time for myself to run, to swim, to whatever it is,
Totally.
to deal with my mental health.
I think that's
Those kind
what
of
it is
things,
for me.
right?
Like I always feel, regardless of weight,
Yeah.
like feel at my best when I'm like doing fun adventures and doing like training for triathlons with you and like that feels good, and have it be more about like doing good things like for your body and being in a good, because like when my body's in a good place, then my mind is too, right?
We all wore heels to sit down today. Like walked in all strut and then sat. Like the confidence of those things.
Love it.
And I think-
Love a little secret.
Yeah.
I think as we age too, I mean, or for me, I think I'm probably the oldest in the group, it's just like realizing that it's just not about exercising to lose weight. It's about like, especially during COVID,
Yeah,
I found that
so
like
much.
I had to move my body and I had to be outside to make it through the day. And I think when you do that for your mental health, naturally, physically, you just feel better and your body does better rather than hardcore, like I'm going to run 30 minutes because I ate a bag of chips.
Yeah.
Right. So,
like
and
try
that's
to out exercise.
right, which doesn't work. And I think as I've aged, and I think that's-
it works less and less as
Yeah.
you get older, right? Yeah.
that's a whole other issue. But it's like we got all the things to worry about.
Is it hot?
Right, it's a hot
It is hot.
not only the weight, the hormones shift and change, and then you can't sleep all night, and you got to get up and function, and you got brain fog because you have all these perimenopausal symptoms. And like men don't struggle with that, and that can affect careers. I was on this webinar about perimenopause and women who had like quit or got fired because their brain fog was so bad, and they didn't even know that that was related to their hormones. And then they sought treatment and like completely different, right? And it's like,
We hit menopause right as our like careers peak.
right?
Yep.
And
And it could be 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be up to
Maybe.
10 years, sometimes longer.
Why didn't our mothers tell us?
Yeah, no,
They ignored
we didn't
it.
talk about that.
Right. We didn't
Yeah.
talk about it.
I think it was like also the point where you go away to university and you don't
Yes.
see your parents.
Well, I
your
think
mothers
it's
go
true.
through it.
Maybe.
That's
Yes. I had children much later than my mom. So we were all at the house, I think, by the time she was experiencing this. So it wasn't
But it was
as
a generational thing. I think that generation didn't talk about it.
yes. Yeah, it's much different too with my
It was
daughter.
like you
and
like
her
kind of grit down, bear down, and
Yeah.
like kind of like just
Dealt with
live
it.
through your hot flashes and brain fog, and just is
friends.
what it is.
Yeah.
I feel like our generation's not gonna let that happen.
No.
Well, even the Generation Z,
Yeah.
they are not, they are very vocal. You know, they grew up in the digital age, but I think they're very much more open, I think, than our generation to actually state what they need and be okay saying no. Where I think, at least for me, it was very difficult saying no. And even to this day, I still struggle a little bit.
But I think it's great for our children growing up too that girls my daughter's age are talking about it and that society is talking about it, because we have cycles. Like our body does different things at different times of the month, and we can be like super creative during our ovulation time where if we're all in the room we can like make shit happen.
Yeah.
And maybe that week before your period you need to rest and do some things. And I think if companies and organizations really did some research into
They need
that,
to get their women on the same cycle. No, I'm just
right?
kidding.
Honestly, could you imagine? For all ovulating at the same time. Could be great.
Everyone
and it
gets
could be-
like that week of their period off at the same time.
Oh my God, I could not.
Brilliant.
not even
We're gonna
imagine.
test this for the pilot.
I like it.
well, but that
See if it improves productivity in Canada.
We do have a productivity
Possible.
problem.
Yeah, we do.
but that brings us to women in research, and I think
Yeah.
when you, I don't know if you guys are
What a
familiar with my
segue, Lana.
normative, right?
Yeah.
I think we keep forgetting about putting women into research because it costs too much money, and their hormones and their cycles affect too many things.
We're not 70% of a man.
Right? No,
We're just
Small men.
just small
Small
men,
men.
Small men with breasts.
right? And a uterus.
don't eliminate that men can have breasts too.
No, this is true.
That is true. Well, to be fair, the first contraceptive was only approved in FDA was what, 1960, and then clinical trials was what, I think like 30 years ago. Not
In the
not
nine-
too
in the
long ago.
90s.
In the
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah,
So there's not a lot of
like most
data
heart
to-
disease meds.
Right.
Yeah.
Like all the clinical trials were done.
So women's health is very much, I think you're going to see that shift quite a bit in the coming years. And I think you're going to start to see a lot of femtech, a lot of new companies. I mean, you saw
There's a lot
it
right
in
now.
COVID, but then because of some of the market changes and the drastic market changes that took place, I think that's coming back, hopefully.
Well, I think people are realizing like who has the household buying power?
Right.
Women.
Women.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to open up a sector that's going to make a change, like both have an impact and potentially have like big financial gains.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
That's
that's
really
true.
interesting.
So what needs to be true on this menopause? Like, I like where you were going with this.
Well, I just think we need to talk about it more. Like, I don't think we realize, I think, like you said, it's right when our careers are advancing and all of a sudden we're going through this stage that we're not aware would be maybe this difficult. Like, I think I read a thing the other day, there was like 170 symptoms of perimenopause. And if that could be for
And it
10
starts
years.
really early. Like
Yeah.
I know, because I like have read up on this topic.
Right.
Like I'm under 40
Right.
and I know I'm experiencing
Yeah.
symptoms of perimenopause. Like, I have sleep issues, like
And you don't
anxiety
know
that
it's
I never had
coming.
before.
Right.
There's no predictive modeling for us.
Right. And like the whole like waking up at night and no matter what you do, not being able to go back to sleep. And then like you got to get up and function the next day. Like it's
Super surprised the group chat's not active from like 3 to 4:30 every morning. It's weird.
I was up last night.
I was up last night
texted
too. Maybe we are on the same cycle.
At bedtime screen time. Nope, we're not doing it.
Right. Yeah. So I
I
think,
read
yeah,
my e-reader.
I think it's just, I think it is changing because obviously on social media, I find even in the last couple of years, like women are talking about it, which is good. But I think it's just the awareness too at workplaces and other places.
It's one thing to consume it one way from like social media, but to have an actual conversation, like the vulnerable moment. I remember you and I having lengthy conversations at a certain restaurant over periods. I think we like scared off the table besides us being like, oh my God. But when you can find those people and like it's on the table, people talk about their heart disease all the time. Socially acceptable to talk about a heart attack.
Right.
Talking about menopause, for some reason, not socially acceptable.
Yeah.
It makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, it does.
Even talking about your period
Right.
makes people uncomfortable.
But I think we should talk about it more.
I agree. But there's this
happens.
whole health inequity issue too, right? Because if you look at, rural areas or underserved populations or vulnerable populations, they actually might not have access to just female products, right?
They should be available to anyone and everyone. Like it is limiting to think the embarrassment, the vulnerability, the reasons why women stay home, illness, like ooh, there's a
Like
lot
we
that
never
happens.
talked about this growing up at all. And even like my grandma is so funny. We actually don't know how old she is.
It's really
It's true. No, I'm not even joking. We have no clue. And she has the greatest genes. Like her face is like, she's the cutest cheeks. She's probably in her late 80s. We have no idea. I've asked aunts and uncles and my mother, and like no one actually knows how old she is. And she won't.
Does she?
won't divulge. I don't
never asked
know.
her?
I don't know. But in like the Middle Eastern culture, you don't like.
Ask
I'm not
those
going to go to
things.
my grandma. Well, I did when I was a kid. I'm like, how old are you? She's like, you don't like. She got all upset. But I think culturally too, like there's certain things that you talk about and there's certain things you don't talk about. And my grandma had, I think, 11 kids because back then you had a lot of kids. They had to work on the farm and do all of the things they needed to do. And she had a couple miscarriages, which she didn't talk about.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know about it until like way later. And then 2 of my uncles died in the Civil War at the time and also didn't know until much later. But there are certain things as females that we go through that we don't talk about. Like when you've bad cramps or, you had to pretend like you were okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were going to suck it up, buttercup, and go to school
Right.
and pretend like you're learning
You're like,
Even though you're in
in
complete
pain. Yeah, in pain.
Yeah.
Like that's how it was.
is
Is
Still is.
yeah,
Still is.
is
Yeah.
yeah.
Still is.
I would No.
I mean, I think
Pop an Advil and play it down.
right.
Yeah.
I think
Get that
the
heat
younger
back.
generation does talk about it. Like my daughter's going to be mortified that I would bring this up, but just like that age group, they talk about it, right? And so it's the awareness, I think, is more, and I think they talk about it in school now much more than they did at our age, right? But back to the age thing too, that bothers me because it brings me back to your comment about like up until a certain age, I didn't want to talk about my age either. However, then when my career became much more exciting, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I have to tell people how old I am so that they respect me because my grandma also has great skin genes. So I feel like, yeah.
You do have great skin
right?
genes.
So
Your
But then-
84th birthday was
got really good genes. So yeah, I think it's like, I don't know, it's never easy.
No, it's true. People do that. Like, I could be your father. And like,
That's gross.
Gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Weird.
just so inappropriate.
like weird power dynamic.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, weird flex, dude. Weird flex.
I'm not
but in
saying
those
that we never
situations, how do you deal with that? Where
I mean,
Pretty much.
how do you deal with that? Where you're still being professional yet setting an appropriate boundary?
It's hard. I think often
is hard.
I just like if that situation happens, you just kind of bite your tongue and say nothing
Yeah.
and move on, right?
maintain eye contact.
Is that what
Make
you
it
do?
feel
That's
really
a power
uncomfortable.
move.
Yeah.
That's a power move.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a situation, well, I was in my early 20s and I was working with a client at the time. And he made a comment about my age and how essentially I was going to just totally screw up this whole project. And I looked at him and I was like picking up paper. And this was initially when he was like, oh, so who's taking notes here? And he looked at me because I was the only female, of course, right? And then he looked at me and he's like, make sure this is successful. Like, this is on you. And I was like, I will deliver this seamlessly. Age is just a number, sir. And I grabbed my stuff and I walked out and I looked at my boss, who was a male, and I was like, where were you on that one?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yes.
I'm like in my early 20s, like, although very insecure at the time, because you're like, I walked out being like, I'm probably going to get fired today.
Right.
Like, I'm like, you know. But it's difficult because you still want to make sure that you're confident, you're not exposing your own integrity and values, but also saying no.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I think that
And having
also
someone
comes.
have your back.
Yeah.
Right.
Other.
That's huge. I mean, I know at my job, I am super supportive. And I do find as I age, I guess, care less about what other people think and what I'm doing. And because I've been doing it for so long, that there's a little bit of that respect there.
And
But
you're
it's
really good at what you do. There's that
Yeah,
part.
I would agree with
yeah,
that
you
one.
guys are helpful in that.
Okay, so let's switch gears on aging gracefully, because I think that's, you know, we sort of sprinkled that throughout this conversation. But what are your thoughts on, can we age gracefully? Are we allowed the space to do that?
Well, considering we were just talking about all dyeing our hair before we started,
Yeah.
I think it all goes back again to the depends on who thinks we're aging gracefully and what society thinks. I think definitely we can. We are. It's just reminding ourselves of what's reality and what we're comfortable with, right?
I also think it comes back to what you said. Like, if you feel good and you like,
Right.
if you look good, you feel good, and the way you show up. So doing things that make you like to invest in yourself, to make you feel good, and how you want to show up.
Exactly.
To me, that's aging gracefully. You're
Yeah.
choosing how you're aging. You're choosing, as long as you don't feel forced to conform to some sort of archetype of what aging as a woman looks like. I don't think it's a problem. I mean, there's like the awkward facial hairs that show up as you age.
There's wax and tweezers.
There's solutions for all that
Right.
stuff, right? Like, I don't know.
Fix that easily.
True. I often think, though, sometimes it's like, I'll talk about myself. It's a me problem.
Oh, for sure.
I think it's not, you know, when I really introspect and dig into my own like self issues, I think it's a me problem. I think I need to let go of not caring what people think. I need to let go of dyeing my hair.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
It is. It really is, because it's all related
Like
to
telling someone
self-love,
to
right?
calm down. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
But like, you also build incredible relationships in everything that you do, like friendships, work relationships, partnerships. So it doesn't surprise me. Like, is it a you thing in that? Like,
I don't know. I think so. I'm working through it in therapy.
okay, also important.
Yeah, no, really, because it's impacted how, like, for instance, sometimes it will take me 30 minutes to send like a really important email because there's 20 some people CC'd, and I need to make sure it's
the T's
Yeah,
are
for
crossed
sure.
right.
and the I's
And those
dotted.
things I'm like, okay. And then it's the perception, because perception's reality. So, like, how do I make sure that I am, you know, crossing my T's, dotting my I's, and so in situations like that, it comes up. But for me, it's about letting go of that perception. Like, who gives a crap about what people think of me?
But
No?
is it because you care about your reputation?
Yeah.
Because that's like a lot of people
True.
do,
Different,
and that's
yeah.
okay,
True. Yeah,
right? Like
totally.
Yeah.
because I know I care a lot about those things too, but it's that like it's how I'm perceived, but it's also like my reputation.
Yeah. Credibility.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But if I don't know, maybe I'm not articulating. I just feel like
That you think a lot about what other people
it
are
makes
gonna
me
think.
heavy
Well,
sometimes.
then that, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I definitely have the same me issue as well. Like there's a lot of things where I'm just like, okay, I need to look like this, or I need to do this, or I can't wear these pants because that looks like this, right? And I'll say something to my husband. He's like, "What? Why? No one is even going to notice that you wore that dress to that event 2 years in a row." It's like
You
but
just
yeah,
wanted a
right.
new dress.
Yeah, that too. But I do think it's more, I don't know, ingrained in women, and I think than men for sure.
They get
There's
to
a
buy
bit
one
of-
tuxedo. We
Right?
get to buy all the gowns.
I do think that like how you show up matters though in some
Yeah,
ways.
it
Like as
does,
much
for
as like
sure.
I don't want to care what other people think. Like the presence that you hold in a room and like
true.
and often like how you dress and like
How you show up.
there's
And I
something to be
also
said
love
about
that. Yeah,
right?
like
yeah.
I love dressing up. I love doing all the
And
things.
so as long as
Yeah.
you're not doing it for other people
Exactly.
and you're doing it because it makes you feel good. Then.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, me and my daughter have that conversation all the time. I was like, I do this because it makes me happy. And then sometimes I was wearing this orange dress in Toronto, and this lady came up to me. She's like, "Did you know in the Indian culture that just totally means joy?" She's like, "You're bringing so many people joy today." And I was like,
Oh, that's so kind.
so I think it just, yeah. And I think we just kind of have our own style and our own individuality. But I think as women, it's much harder to not think about those things sometimes, right? Like going to the grocery store just out of bed is like, oh, please don't run into anyone. But I always do. So
I used
we
to, I
survive.
couldn't leave my house sometimes. I'd wear a hat.
Right, yeah.
Sunglasses.
Yeah.
But then COVID happened.
Yes.
And I stopped caring. I stopped wearing makeup.
That did help.
And I just didn't care. And like sometimes I felt like that was a good time to just reset and rebalance. I didn't dye my hair for 2 years.
Right.
Like I kind of didn't care, mainly because I didn't leave my house.
Exactly.
So, but then after that, it was a huge impact on mental health. Like I just sat in my basement and worked, which was like
yourself.
horrible.
Yeah.
Isolation was crazy. This is when you had 2 people per cohort, which that was just unrealistic.
I just came out of working from my basement for 4 years and I didn't
Right?
even know how depressed I was, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it impacted us. So what do we, because I think we don't talk about mental health enough. And I think it's something that I'm trying to embrace because I've always been very quiet about going to therapy and really working on myself and overcoming a lot of things, which I think it's actually made me better.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what a place I was until COVID,
Right.
where I was like, oh my God, I am not in a good place. How do we overcome that challenge?
About talking about it?
Mental health. And what do we do? What do we do to help overcome those challenges?
I think there's little things like my therapy appointments are in my calendar at work. Like it's just there. It's not like it's a secret. It's not necessarily that you're always talking about it, but it's just like this is an important part of something that we have to give people permission and space to do. So it is like you'd have no problem putting your doctor's appointment in a calendar. Why not? Like this is your health just as much as that. And I think it is normalizing the conversation. And I had one girlfriend who was just like, it's covered. You get to go to, so you get 6 hours of like, why would you not use it? I was like, that's a good point. Like I have an unused health benefit. Why would I take advantage of that? And then it's like, oh my God, why am I not been doing this forever?
And I think it's also taking advantage of all those things, like the therapy, the massages, the acupuncture, the naturopath, whatever route you want to go. And I think normalizing that for kids is also important. Like my 8-year-old went for his first massage and he's like, why have I never done this before?
Awesome.
So funny.
Right?
I told my daughter about it and she's like, do I have to be naked?
Right?
It is a bit weird
I
for them.
choose to be, but yeah.
That's up to you.
And I think talking to them more about it, like in our house, it's big of like moving your body and especially outside. When someone's in a bad mood, let's just go outside.
Not
right?
everybody has the privilege of therapy. That's not
Exactly.
covered. Like
Exactly.
it's not, speaking of societal norms, like
Yes.
mental health is like
Inequities.
not covered in our health system. But yeah, things like being in nature, being outside,
Sun, vitamin
being
D.
around people who like lift you up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to prioritize it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the hard part.
It's
I think
hard
that's-
too.
Yeah. There's
By the
always things
time,
that
usually by the time you realize, like, oh, I probably need to do something about this, like things
Yeah.
have gotten pretty bad usually by then.
And I think it's just checking in with your girlfriends. And because, like you said, the Instagram highlight reel is like, oh my God, they're doing so great. It's like, but in reality, there could be struggles, right? Especially during COVID. Like, I was in my own little world, like struggling, like trying to be a working mom. My husband was going to work every other day and homeschooling and parenting and work. And then I had girlfriends like you who I was like, oh my God, all by themselves all day. At least I have people surrounding me, right? So I think it's just like, it was such a hard time and it caused so much divide between so many people. And so I think, yeah, we just need to stay close to our friends and check in on them and our family and the men in our lives too, because that's also a place where people are not talking
Put on the
about
list
it.
of all the things we have to do to
Right?
have it all.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Struggle.
can we have it all? That's the $1 million question.
I think we need to celebrate the moments where we do have it all. And they might be fleeting and they might be short, but in that moment, I think we need to give pause and acknowledge it. And celebrate it in one another too.
Yeah, and I think it comes in seasons. Like maybe me and my husband are doing great and we have it all, but then it's like, oh my God, the kids need the priority right now because something's going on, or your work needs it. Like, right? Like, I think we can have it all. It's just in different time frames or different I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to.
And it depends how you define it. Like
Yeah,
it's
totally
back to
depends
just
how you define it.
what makes you feel good and doing all the things that, do you have time and do you have the energy to do all the things that you want to be doing? And if you don't, then what trade-offs are you willing to make?
That's so true. I think it's really about what you want, right? Because I have a job that I absolutely love. And not many people can say that. And I always tell my children, like, it doesn't matter what you do, but if you love doing it, that makes the difference, right? And so I feel like lots of days I do have it all. Yes, is there all these little things I could exercise more and eat healthier and spend more time with friends and check in on my grandparents, like all those things. But like, I still feel like I have it pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we have to remind ourselves that we're human. But I think women are just superhuman.
Yeah.
I think I am just. We should celebrate that because I'm like listening to all of you talk and I am like overwhelmed, right? We are mothers, we are sisters, we are wives, we are caregivers. We work an obscene amount of hours. And at the end of the day, if we have time in the 24 hours, we take a little bit and take care of ourselves, whatever that looks like, if we have time.
Right.
Right? Where it's almost like it should be the other way around. We got to take care of ourselves first,
Yes.
put us first. But it's difficult in such a busy time. And I struggle. Like, yes, I think we can have it all. And then on days like in those moments, like I feel like I don't. And I feel like I'm literally at the bottom trying to significantly crawl my way out of this hole without, air support.
Yeah.
Some days I really feel like that. And so I have to remind, my therapist says, I need to remind myself to be kind
Yes.
to myself. And she's like, would you talk to your friend that way?
No.
I'm like, no. I would tell her she's badass
Right?
and she's
Exactly.
awesome. And she
As
goes,
you are.
you need to talk to yourself that way. And I'm like, that's so hard.
But it's such a good reminder.
Right?
But I think that's why we have to do it for each other.
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard to ask for help. It's really easy to offer help.
Yeah.
So accept it when we're offering.
Yeah.
And you all as well. Because I think we're all the same.
Yeah.
In
there's that.
in some respects. Yeah.
But I think we all have those days too, right? Where it's just questioning everything. Like, and then it's just like one day at a time.
One day at a time. Yeah. Anything before we close? Anything coming to your mind?
I think we just keep chatting about it so that our daughters and our future grandchildren can have what they perceive as it all. Because it doesn't have to be what the media and social media and everyone else expects them to have. I think that's the key thing. It's like what's important to us versus everyone else.
Yeah. Define your own success. And, I mean, we come from generations and generations of women before us who never even had the option to have it all. And so, like, let's lift each other up and set up our next generation for success so they don't have to deal with some of the things we're still dealing with that we shouldn't be.
I loved your comment about like amplify the voices of the other women in the room. I think that is so true. And I think it speaks to the power of connection.
Great point, Christy. Great point. I love what Christy said.
Can I second that, please? I adore each of you. You are my favorite humans. It's so hot in here. I'm like,
so
the energy in here is freaking electric.
The perimenopause.
A glow. Oh, how she glows.
I love each of you separately. Thank you so much for spending the time to talk about this very important topic. I think with your influence, I'm excited for what is to come. And thank you. I just adore each of you, and I'm in complete awe and admiration. I'm just so privileged to call you ladies.
Thank you, Vidya.
Yes,
Thanks for
thanks
having
for
us.
inviting us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.